Hey guys, so this video is going to be a little bit different than the ones you're used to me doing. I've done the Tarot Tuesday thing for a little while. There was a brief period where I did the Tales from the Frozen North, and I do want to get back to those. You will see those on this channel soon. This is something a little different. This is something a little more personal. I'm sure you can tell that I'm hemming and hawing a little, trying not to get into it, but in the interests of shedding my old skin and letting go of my old fears, I'm going to tell you guys about the Stormarrow. For those of you who follow me on my Facebook page, Nine Nights Wisdom, you probably saw me allude to it a week or two ago. There was this post that I found that talked about the eclipse from the 16th and how it was the end of like a 13-year cycle. And so I sat and I thought about it for a minute because it sparked that sort of, self-examination. And I was trying to think of what might be happening to me 13 years ago that would be coming full circle now. And I kept coming back to this event that you've now heard me call the Stormarrow at least once. And nothing else really fits the bill. And I'm fairly sure it was around that time, but I'm still delaying. So this is going to get intensely personal, but I was very, very, very young when I had sort of like my crisis of faith. Now, thanks to my studies in philosophy, I can tell you that, well, I share to a degree the opinions of Søren Kierkegaard. I think he's Danish. He was a Danish theistic existentialist. And those are pretty rare because most existentialism is atheistic. That isn't to say that you can't hold this worldview and believe in a god or many gods. I do. But by and large, it just holds that there is no inherent meaning to life. And that you also can't get it from God or faith or whatever. But Kierkegaard was theistic existentialist. Specifically, he was Christian. But his thing was that the struggle with faith is what gives your life meaning. And he did a lot of writing about the leap of faith, which is to say that you can practice whatever faith you want, or at least that's how I interpret this, but ultimately your relationship to divinity, whatever form that takes, is something that's really super personal. It's something that's unique to every individual person who goes through it. And so all of that is to preface the story that I'm about to tell you. Okay, so bear that in mind, that got something in my mouth. Everyone's leap of faith is different, and this is sort of the story of mine, or at least my coming to the edge of the cliff. But when I was very small, my grandmother died. I was like 8 or 9 years old, maybe. She was my mother figure. My parents were both very young when they had me. They had to work to be able to feed the three of us and keep a roof over our head and the lights on and details. But she was an extremely, extremely religious person. And I really only know that in hindsight. Like, I know that from conversations with my father and my aunt, the older two of her children who knew her the best. I never really spoke to my other uncle about it, and I never wanted to bring it up with my grandfather, because how do you talk to someone about when the love of their life dies? But being exposed to religion as young as I was, because my dad wanted that to be part of my world. Grateful to him for that, although it ended up not being exactly what he wanted, I don't think. But the struggle was that, to the best of my knowledge, as a probably too precocious young boy, she was a good person. To my mind, she was the best person. And it didn't make sense to me that he being the Christian God, would end her life and ruin all of ours if he really loved us. I promise this is not an anti-Christian rant before I go any further. Like, if he speaks to you, fantastic. He doesn't speak to me. But, rightly or wrongly, I blamed him and the world and whatever when I was capable. It wasn't at first, but the more I thought about it, once I understood what it meant to die and be dead, the more that I hated him. And nobody could answer the question I wanted answered in a satisfactory way. You know, I could understand, you know, that she was gone and where she had gone to. And in as best as a 10-year-old kid can, what had happened to her, like physically, because it was cancer. But no one could give me the spiritual answers I needed. I pretty distinctly remember, you know, the pastor of our church when I was younger had this habit, which was, I thought was commendable, I still do, of standing at the door to the sanctuary and shaking the hands of every member of the congregation as we left at the end of services on Sunday. And he knew all our names, and he remembered an inordinate number of little details about everyone. He was a great man, but I point blank in front of everybody when I got to him at some point, asked him, if God loves us so much, why does he take the people we love away from us? And he couldn't answer my question. And just, it was this really poisonous rage that coiled at the center of my chest for a long time. So, all that backstory aside, let's fast forward a few years and get to the point that I'm trying to make here. Yeah, I went through the motions. You know, like, I was baptized in the Christian church. There's a Bible somewhere in one of my family's houses that has my name on the cover and all kinds of notes about the book of Revelation in the back, because it was always my favorite. Go figure. But so 13 years ago, 2006, I was 14 years old, and it rained all summer. Just like there was a period where for a week it rained nonstop. 24 hours a day, literally all 7 days of the week. It was close to where my parents still live. There's a golf course, or there was a golf course. It's not a golf course anymore, and I think this is probably why. The river, the Clinton River, that flows through that area, broke its banks and flooded the golf course. And not by a few inches either. The golf course was a lake. The lower parts of it were basically a lake. Like, the people who lived on its edge had water lapping at their back doors. It was insane. I had never seen so much rain in my life. One of the days that stormed, there was a guy canoeing down our street because the storm drains had overflowed, backed up and overflowed. It was it was ridiculous. It was like the joke that springs to mind is that it was like, pull a Noah, cut down the trees in the backyard and build a boat. But one night after one of those storms had rolled through, I was standing outside on the porch with my dad, and I don't remember what we were talking about. Probably not much of anything important, but the sky was red. You see the color of this paint? Not quite this red. It was paler, but it was this all over. And we were standing there in the front yard, just, talking about whatever a 14-year-old boy and his father have to talk about. And he looked up and he goes, "Whoa, look at that." And I stepped off the porch to see what he's pointing to. And there was a huge rainbow. Like, just as brilliant as you could want. Picture perfect. And just as I was about to remark about how cool that was, because I'd never seen a rainbow that vibrant before, the passing storm fired like one last bolt of lightning off, but it didn't go down towards the ground. It went up into the clouds, and if this is the curve of the rainbow, it shot through the curve like an arrow. That's the Stormarrow. This is like that. That's the event that occurred for me. And I sat there and I knew immediately that it was portentous of something. Like, I knew that it was an omen. I knew that it was a sign. Looking back on it, like, I've always wanted my world to be magical. And that was the first thing I had ever experienced that felt like it might be magic. And so I just stood there for the longest time, just with my mouth hanging open. And like, when I finally managed to speak again, because I interrupted my dad because he was still talking. I was like, "Did you see that?" He was like, "Yeah, that was really weird." And just, I got the feeling that it wasn't significant for him, which didn't do anything to lessen the impact that it had on me. If anything, it drove the point home that at least for me, it felt like I was supposed to see it. And so I finished talking to him about whatever, the grass probably needed to be cut or something because it rained for forever. I don't know. But once the conversation was over, I immediately went inside, and first chance I got, I jumped on the computer and I started doing research on rainbows and lightning bolts and what the connection was there. And I eventually came to Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge that connects, the 9 realms of Norse mythology, and Thor, the god of thunder, who routinely crosses it to, protect Midgard or go make war on the giants or whatever it is that he's up to at any given time, but he's the most frequent traveler on it, other than maybe Odin. And I don't know, something about that was like, like the distant rumbling of thunder in the distance, but I didn't hear it with my ears. I heard it with my spirit, if that makes sense at all. I just like to connect what had happened to me to Thor seemed like a really natural join to make. And so just it was dig, it was read, it was learn. It was this thing where, because I had heard of Thor, like I was a budding metalhead at 14. I had listened to Amon Amarth. I knew, or thought I knew, who Thor was, but I definitely heard of him. I'd read Marvel comics, which again, I thought I knew who Thor was, but it was, there was something poignant about it. And so I don't remember if it was the Stormarrow that first inspired me to like try to pray to him, but it was definitely the thing that put me on the path to doing it. But to talk to him was the first time it felt like somebody was listening in a really, really long time. And there's more to this story. I could go through with you the long silence that eventually came and the wandering of many paths that eventually led me to Odin and back to the Norse pantheon. But that's a story for another time. I guess that in telling this story, what I'm after is to demonstrate the ways in which everyone has a different call to answer. And also how small your world can be if you discount any faith on account of just one. Because before the Stormarrow, like I told you, there was hatred here and lots of it right here. And hate coiled in your chest doesn't do you any good. It certainly didn't do me any favors. Because I mean, by then I was so used to holding on to it that it just made more sense to put it somewhere else. That caused a whole bunch of other problems for me that I don't need to go into in this video. But I still, like, so to bring this back around to that thing I was talking about earlier with the whole leap of faith thing, this was mine. The Stormarrow was the beginning of my walking to the edge of that cliff and deciding to throw myself over it to see what lay on the other side, to become the fool, if you like the imagery of tarot. To take that first step into the unknown without knowing whether I would fall or fly. That's not to say I'm not grateful for my wings, or very proud of them, because I am, but the most important thing that you can do with this limited lifetime that we get is to be honest, at least with yourself, about who and what you are, and I guess this is my weird way of trying to articulate that. Um, but you know your true north when the wind blows out of it. Something inside you knows. And when I saw that lightning bolt streak across the sky through that rainbow, I knew that I was finding mine. So now, not everyone's is going to be this flashy. Not everybody's, and that's not a bad thing. You might hear echoes of your true north in a song that plays on the radio, or see it in the glint of sunlight off a mirror. It doesn't have to be this hugely portentous, ominous thing. But speaking from just my own experience, when something happens to you that rings, that it echoes in your memory and in your spirit and in your heart in ways that seem difficult to explain, chase those echoes, hunt that feeling down, pounce on it and rip its throat out with your teeth if you have to. But when your true north calls, you have to answer. I genuinely think that your life is immeasurably poorer if you don't. Um, I've got some other stories that are kind of like this one. Um, Actually, I think this one will be next. The story of my staff, the story of Wayfinder. Because it's the next thing. It's the other great omen in my life. So keep your eyes out for that one eventually. When I recover from the bearing of my soul that this was. And I will see you guys around. Thanks for listening.